friendship. It is one of my core values, and it is one of the most important ingredients of a well lived life. And yet, true friendship, in which we can show up as our full, authentic selves, can be so hard to find and keep in these times, especially interracially, and especially between white women and Black women. That's why I was so excited that my guests this week, Tanisha Arena and JAC Patrissi, agreed to get real with me and share their story of how they grew their deep, abiding friendship. Tanisha Arena is a Black woman in community leadership as the executive director of Arise for Social Justice in Springfield, Massachusetts. She holds a master's in nonprofit management and is an educator at Growing a New Heart, where she trains on holding affinity, anti-racism, self-education, and support groups, and on dialogues across difference of social location, including race and ethnicity. Tanisha has deep roots in the field of anti-violence work, specializing in community advocacy and responses to intimate partner violence within the LGBTQ community. JAC Patrissi is a white woman engaged in kinship-minded anti-racist work within a loving, multiracial, transformative collective at Growing a New Heart. JAC was tutored in popular education by Paulo Freire and is a trained body-centered trauma clinician. She is the co-founder of A Call for Change, a non-carceral helpline for people who cause harm in intimate relationships and communities. Since 1989, she has been an anti-violence advocate working with survivors while learning and practicing non-carceral accountability practices for people using violence and control and other tools of dominance. Tanisha and JAC bring humor, humility, and honesty as they discuss what is needed to move beyond barriers, listen below the surface to what each person is trying to say, and make room for each other to show up fully without stepping on each other's toes. This conversation brought a lot of laughter, and the sense of rootedness and expansiveness that Tanisha and JAC teach about is palpable. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. We've gone back and forth about many different topics that we could talk about all around dialogues across difference. And one topic has emerged from our conversations, which is friendships between Black women and white women. I'm excited to explore that with you today. And I'd love to start with the question of how did you two become friends?
So I'd gone to this training that was like on a rainy Friday. And it's funny that I remember it was a rainy Friday. And it was like, oh, okay. And then somehow in the ether, Jack showed up in my office and she's like, do you train this with me? I was like, okay. And that was the beginning of 2020. And we trained, I think, the only in person dialogues that year. It just kind of went from there, having this experience of being a participant with the dialogues and then doing the dialogues and just like having our lives being connected in that way and to talk about things. And then we picked up some other people along the way and like it just unfolded. And we've just been this motley crew for well, almost 6 years now.
Yes. So in that training, first of all, Tanisha's brilliant. And so when it was time to pair off, there was an uneven number. So I just turned to Tanisha because I could already see she can handle working with the facilitator because not everyone would feel like that was cool. But she was so fast on her feet. I was like, this will be fine. And we started doing a practice. We got to a part that really made us both laugh. And if you can laugh with someone, you already know that you're connecting. And she was laughing at herself. And I was like, oh, okay. Like if you could do very complicated things, have insight into yourself, laugh at yourself, and then keep rolling, I was like, this person's amazing. And that's why it didn't matter to me that she was just learning it when I got this contract to teach dialogues to other people. And I know I was looking for co-facilitation because it's always better to demonstrate dialogue while you're doing that instead of putting someone else on the spot. So I asked T because I was like, this person already has that humility, that insight, the skillfulness to just keep growing. And then when you start doing it, like T said, you're talking about your life. You're applying it to your relationship. So we got personal right away. And it took time to discover, but like we're both really into history. We're both really loyal. We both have a super high work ethic. She loves to cook. I love to eat. We both love the little babies in our lives. We both love shoes. We're like way into political analysis. We're both very, I'm a Aries moon. She's an Aries sun. So we don't burn each other at all. And you wouldn't know that unless you could get past the original barriers. And that's stuff we really want to talk about because there are so many relationships that could be healing relationships across race and ethnicity that women can have because we get stuck on the barriers.
I'm an Aries sun and an Aries Mercury as well, so there's some affinity there. And I'm excited to talk about how to get unstuck from these barriers. Before we go there, can you tell a little bit more about this Dialogues Across Difference workshop? And Tanisha, you said it hit. Can you say what hit there?
So the thing that became funny that Jack was referencing, we were doing a practice dialogue, and the topic was why don't women leave, like domestic violence relationships? And I'm someone, I will give you all of the information, like beat you with the facts, like this, and rapid fire. That's just how my brain works. So we're in this dialogue, and that's exactly what happened. And Jack's like, I'm dead. I'm dead in the corner. Like, and it was just like, oh no.
Can you say what that
I mean, like, okay, you killed me. Like, I got nothing to say. I'm flat. I'm dead. I'm out. Like she gave me the treatise from 1450 on about why I was wrong. And she was 100% right. But I was also killed, dead, like destroyed.
Yeah.
Nothing to say. Okay. Thanks, Tanisha. I just wanted to what did that mean? She was dead. Okay.
Yeah. I beat her with all the facts. And, like, there's something to that. And that was the way that I was navigating, like, in these conversations. And it was feedback that I had gotten in another place. And in my head, I'm like, okay, these people don't know each other. They are in different parts of my life and whatever, but they're saying the same thing. So there has to be something about this. And then getting more in depth with dialogues across differences, it was like, oh, like you're learning about yourself and the way that you process and what's your lead intelligence and how do you engage with other people? Like if you had a magic wand, what do you want people to know in the way that they're communicating with you? Like, I am a fast processor, I'm logical sequential. And I'm like, I want you to get to the point, right? Because I don't need all that extra. And then at the same time, because I am logical sequential, I'm going to give you all of the facts. But you can't do that because you kill the other person. Like with all of that, and they don't have anything to say, and your dialogue shuts down. And that's not what you want to have happen. So it was transformational in that space. Like, oh, you got to stop telling everybody all the things. And it's a lifelong practice because I'm still that person, but I work at it.
What's different now? Like if you used to kill people with the facts and you still think that way, what shifted? What new skills do you have or what's happened?
It's an awareness of other people and how they're showing up and what I need to do in that space to make room for this dialogue. I'm constantly thinking about what's underneath the things that they're saying. Like, what problems are they trying to solve? What are they wrestling with? And how do we come together in this space where they can be heard, I can be heard, and we can keep going back and forth like in this little dance and nobody's stepping on anybody's toes. Like, even learning about different kinds of intelligences and the way that people operate, like, oh, there's some terms for what I got going on, being logical sequential, like, and what does that mean? And how you need other people to show up for you, and then other folks and what are their intelligences and how they need people to show up for them. I didn't know that. I was just saying what I needed to say and then not really grasping why conversations would go how they did or they wouldn't go at all. So it's been really different.
I imagine it like learning to play ball so that you're not just throwing the ball at them, but they're able to catch it and throw it back to you.
Yeah.
And yeah. Since this conversation is really rooted in your relationship around dialogues across difference and the skills there, I'm curious, Jack, if you could share about the origins of this model and you're teaching it and what called you to do that and some history and context.
There's maybe two roots to it. One is personal, my own growing up in a house where there was domestic violence, and as a child, listening through the wall of my bedroom into the kitchen at my parents arguing and learning in a really dysfunctional way that later on served me to track the argument and see where and why, what the patterns were as a little child. And of course, I was all emotionally hinged on what could make this better. And then seeing that there's a whole different set of rules that come into play if somebody uses domination, threat, or violence, which did happen. And so I was keenly aware as a young child, then growing into young adulthood, that all those communication skills did not apply if somebody wanted to exert dominance or superiority towards you. And I took them all. I became a mediator. I taught small group communication skills, the popular methods, nonviolent communication, and I learned them all. And from a personal experience, I was like, you're not really looking at positionality, division of labor, power, and control in a way that's real. And so that was stirring in me. And then here's the other route. I got this fellowship after undergrad to examine the way women and children told stories about themselves, how it crafted their power in relationship to misogyny and white supremacy. And this is in the 80s. I started by learning from Maori grandmothers in New Zealand and then going to Australia, learning from the indigenous peoples there. And what happened was I went from this big intellectual idea to just being totally humbled into silence about the completely other way, a decolonized way of dealing with the greatest harms. I was sitting in circle with parents of murdered children who were with the people who'd murdered their children, and with survivors of sexual violence and their families and their community with the people who'd harmed them in the 80s. This is before what white people called restorative practice in North America. And thank God, I just shut up. I am thinking later about the Irish peace process and how one of the peacemakers said he listened his way to peace. And I feel like if I look back, one of the origins of dialogue was listening to be changed, deeply changed, in a way that rattled my identity of how to approach anything related to conflict. And one other lesson like that was when I was in the Middle East and was just in dialogue with Palestinian people and then later other people in Egypt, and being with the rage and the grief and the desperation and what they wanted changed. And the dialogue rules that I had learned didn't apply. What helped was the more decolonized approach, the indigenous approach. And those are the two roots. My own wisdom from the rules are different if someone's going to be superior and dominant and use violence. And then the other, the depth of harm and what it means not to come from a superior stance as a culture that's unconsciously colonizing right and wrong, justice, that has totally different ideas of justice and love and connection. And over the years, what I started to develop, I realized was different than what I'd been trained in, and it worked. And so it really caught on. And I learned to make explicit whatever people needed to know, like what needs to be in a handbook. And we decided as a group not to sell this as a book because you could manipulate the shit, excuse my language, out of people with this skill set. And fascism uses a lot of the skills that we teach to its purposes. And we only teach people who are willing to come with intent to create healing in their lives. Because we want people to be stronger if they want to create healing conditions in their communities, transformative healing conditions. We want them to be stronger with the wisdom they have.
As you share all that, Jack, I think about the power dynamics between Black folks and white folks and Black women and white women, and all of the history that, whether it may be in our personal lives or our families or just systemically in society, all the history that is brought to every interaction. And I'm just curious to hear more, like that decolonized way of being together. What more do you want to share about what's needed to come to conversation, dialogue, friendship?
I think it's really important we work from the inside out and that we are attending to our own healing and get in right relationship to our wounds. We can't wait to be healed to have good relationships across fractured divides. And we can't wait for other people, but we can get in a more responsible, a safer relationship where our wounds are not running us. We get to know them, we get to be with them, we get to work with them, and that makes us more reliable to be in relationship, to be changed by others and have others change us. And that makes it possible for us to show our hearts. I think of a mentor I had years ago in the 90s, a woman of color, and she actually told me that she had sabotaged my career early on. She had said, I want to confess to you that there were times where people asked who could do something, and I knew you were the right person, but I didn't want it to be you. So I denied you those opportunities. And I asked her, what changed? And she said, you showed me your heart. And I realized my mistrust was in the way. And so it was a huge gift. I didn't care about those opportunities. I cared more about how were we going to heal? Like, how do we go forward? Because later, it ended up being me who had to tell her something really difficult. And she still calls me every year on the anniversary of that very hard conversation. And she says nobody would have gotten through, but we had already made this connection. And so this is teaching me. And I keep thinking about how we don't know what the gifts are that we have in store to give each other unless we can get into this work from the inside out to create mutual loving accountability and trust. And then I think it doesn't always work. Tanisha and I had this friend. She spent a lot of time really talking with us, a Black woman talking with us about this, really getting into dialogues. And it was all cool unless I disagreed. And so like we started to understand like that's a whole other layer of work. So she was saying things that I would think of that were very anti-Semitic, but I wasn't labeling them. I was using my dialogue skills. And when she got the idea that I did not agree, that was it. She didn't care. It was done. And she knew how to be skillful and she didn't want to. So she was mean. And I know, like, that's really painful. Like, you do know the skills and you're choosing not to because the feeling of what happens when there's tension between you. Like, what happens when you actually don't agree out something really important, and all of the unhealed stuff is going to rush in, all of it.
I have a follow-up question for you, Jack, there, but I just want to ask you, Tanisha, if there's anything coming up for you right now.
Well, the memories of that time and space and knowing this person and the disappointment that comes, especially for me in relation to people that I would consider as elders. And you're looking for their wisdom and guidance in a space, and then it falls apart. And it's like, what is that? And there was learning that came later about the difference between an elder and an older, because not everybody becomes an elder, but we all get older and what that entails. So for me, as a Black woman watching that come undone, there's a sadness in that too, because obviously you want to see the connection flourish and grow. And when it cannot because of someone's, I guess, willful, I don't know if I want to call it ignorance in that space, but just their inability to make that shift. We're not always right about all the things. And when someone can say, hey, that thing is wrong, I think we're socialized to immediately jump to, and it is the wound part. It's the, well, that's racist, or like, you don't know. And it's sometimes we're just wrong. It's not because racism, it's like, but you're just wrong. And we've all been socialized into things. We'll embody these values of dominance, and we all got it. And that was really hard and disappointing because on two levels, right? As a dialogue practitioner and watching an elder fall from, I guess, that grace. And it's like, oh, that's really not there. So it's sad.
I'm curious what you'd say about how to discern in these moments where there's disagreement, perhaps between a white woman and a Black woman. They may be friends, may have just met each other, to know like what is mine and what is yours and what is ours together. And there's just always so much, given the histories that we bring to any interaction, there's just so much untangling to be done to know and discern whose responsibility is what. So I'm curious what you'd say to that.
I think the question is going to depend on the quality of the relationship. Like, what have the exchanges been beforehand? That holding of, I cannot assume trust, is something that's very real. And for me, on the other side of that, I deeply appreciate when a white person is aware of this very thing. Like, she don't got no reason to trust me. As a matter of fact, she has 10,000 reasons to not trust me. And that is the burden that is born to a white person because of these histories and everything else. So it's like, one, if you show up and you're in that knowing and the humility with that, it also makes the exchange a heck of a lot different in this assessment of like, what is happening here? Are we having a genuine disagreement, or is this rooted in something deeper and, you just racist and like, I done hit a hot button and it's all coming out? How have previous interactions gone? Of like, how good and graceful is somebody at being wrong? One, can you laugh at yourself? Like, what's coming out in the rest of this dialogue gives some pretty good ideas as to like what's really happening here. Someone could genuinely not know. And there's plenty of room for that. And it's going to come out because, again, it's like, I can't assume this trust. I don't know everything. And even that, like, from a white person, like, I don't know everything. I'm not the arbiter of all that's right and good. Like, I don't get the last word, like all of those pieces. If you're showing up with that, it makes that exchange a heck of a lot different because it's outwardly addressing the places where the relationships have been fraught. And we can continue to dialogue. It's like you're showing up with your humility. I've got mine. I'm curious. And we're just sitting in the tension. Like, people are going to disagree because they're humans. And is this that kind of disagreement, or is it something else? Which we can look at these other pieces to determine that very thing.
Anything you'd add there, Jack?
I endorse the timing because in the early phases of relationship, I expect the total mistrust. And I think white people need what I call intersectional resilience. even in the beginning of T and I's relationship, we were both speaking at a statewide conference, and T had not seen me do this thing before, and we didn't know, we were getting to know each other. She didn't know that we both love history. And so I went to do this presentation thing, and then T turned to me in front of everyone and was like, "You have to know your history." And I was like, yeah, thinking to myself, most white people don't. And I just rolled with it. And what I said out loud was, absolutely. And here it is. Because if I clutched my pearls and was like, she's doubting me, then we're not getting anywhere. Like we said in the other podcast, my social location is Melania adjacent. My symbol is a big problem. Like, just like I don't have to open my mouth and I'm a problem. And so it has to go the other way. I have experiences of friends of T's saying to me, "You are not what I expected you were going to be, JAC." And I'm like, that's good, because I know I'm starting where my people start. But like T said, if it's later in the relationship, it's established, you have shared each other, you have trust, or like the story I told, the woman knew skills. When I see something like that happen, I go with my gut, but I always check in with people, not me. And so actually, we call our little consortium, Reggie nicknamed us the bad kids table. So I was checking with the bad kids table, and they saw it go down, and they were like, "Oh no, that is absolutely her stuff. This is not you." And because I can't, even if I think I'm really clear, I always need that. I need that check in. And it gets complicated. Like, I had a very, very delicate, hard won relationship with an Indigenous woman who had experienced so much harm and had trusted no white people. And we fought for that relationship. And it worked until she became part of the group. And then I learned, like, oh, wait a minute. Group dynamics interracially are way too hard for some people. Like, they can do just like two people. But if you have like a bunch of different social locations, different ethnicities, different races, that for some people is too much labor too soon. So like T said, you're looking for a lot of elements. Where are you? You two might be great, but are you in a group? That's going to complicate it even more and cause more tensions. And so those are the elements that I think of to add to what T said.
One of my favorite quotes is, "Love is 90% pacing." Not exactly sure what the 90% means, but it's like love is a lot of pacing. So trust takes time and humility. Can you talk about the field of peace? And in our writing back and forth, you share that that's just so fundamental to how we are together. And I'd love to go there.
So it's becoming clear in this dialogue here that there's a lot of labor that is required to create the conditions to have healing relationships across profound differences. And that would drain us or burn us out unless we find a position to come from a place within ourselves where we feel profoundly resourced. And so we use this term, a field of peace, and we spend a lot of time in our dialogues trainings helping people find it and amplify it, or find it for the first time. Because first, when we started to do the trainings, we'd spend 15 minutes on it, and the evaluations would tell us this was the most important thing. And then we added 20 minutes, and then people would tell us, we need more practice on this part. And then we're like, okay, we got the picture. And so we started adding storytelling and different activities, learning activities, to help people find a place where they feel grounded, rooted, and expansive. Grounded, rooted, and expansive. It could be, many people find that from some kind of spiritual tradition or relationship to what they think of as the divine. Other people find it in memories or calling forward relationships to the earth, natural beings. Sometimes participants have educated us on things that we never thought of as the field of peace, and they trust and they tell us. And I've learned from them. One that stays with me is this woman who trusted us enough to tell us, she's like, I've never told a group of this, but I had an experience with an extraterrestrial. I'm the kind of person you can tell that to, because that's like the fourth person in my life who's told me that. So I'm like, okay, I am so glad that you're saying this. And she said what she experienced was beyond imagining and beyond words, and that she'd never thought of drawing on that to influence her relationships. The reason we all do this together is because there are people who are looking at me the whole training going, who is this woman? And then there are people who are hanging on every word T says. And they're like, if T thinks this woman is okay, then I will tolerate her. But you got some participants to really share things that have changed all of us about finding the field of peace.
Yeah. And not everybody could rock with, oh, you got abducted by aliens and like, this is your field of peace. Like, okay. For me, once upon a time, it was a literal field. Like out here by the Quabbin, if you go down a little path, there's like a field and it's like running around in the field. I'm like, am I actually frolicking in a field? Like, oh my gosh, that was a peaceful experience. And then it shifted when the grandbabies came along. And we had done a training with someone that I know out in community who doesn't have the luxury. And Catherine, you know this as an elected official, like you can't just shoo people away. Like you have to engage, right? And so she's like, I don't know if I could get into this field of peace and what is that going to look like? And it was like, okay, I've seen her out in public with her grandbaby. And so I said, well, can you imagine having these constituent conversations while you're holding your grandbaby? What is the energy there? And what do you want that to be? And this energy, it's like, first of all, we're not going to have arguing. We're not going to have all this negativity. We're not like, it's going to be a different kind of conversation in protection of this space with your grandbaby. And she just, I could rock with that. Like, imagine you're holding your grandbaby while you're talking to this person. Like, how are you going to be in that space with them? So it's helping people connect to the things that they aren't necessarily thinking about as peaceful, but yet when they're engaged in these ways, it is in fact peaceful. And me like having this grandma energy too, like there's a total shift thinking about these little people, being with these little people. It's like, I could talk to you. I'm good. I'm totally regulated because this is a peaceful space. We've had participants talk about, their relatives. Like one guy, he's like, my mom, she was amazing. And like, he'd imagine having these conversations standing next to her. And we name things. I'm like, listen, that can't be my mama. My mama's like Mortal Kombat. There's no peace in that. But I think Frankie's mom, he's like, yeah, my mom was this. And it's like, Frankie, can we borrow your mom? He's like, absolutely. So people in the space can borrow, like, yep, I'm standing next to Frankie's mom. And we're going to have this conversation in this kind of way that has the energy of peace instead of this combat kind of experience. So it's the self-regulation that needs to occur to be able to engage with someone else who might be dysregulated.
We have a project that uses these skills that's been under a long-term evaluation, and our evaluators are showing us after each dialogue, you have to answer this 35-item intensive reflection. And the evaluators are saying that the pivotal skill of all the skills is finding the field of peace, that they can see the conversations become productive and effective when the responder, the person facilitating the dialogue, uses them with the field of peace. And that's true when you're having it. I can tell, because if I'm really honest, if I'm not in the field of peace, I'm trying to be like domination with raisins. I'm trying to be like fancy oppressive, just so you won't know. I'm like, I just want to win. And like, if I'm coming from the field of peace, I actually am seeking to make meaning and I want to be changed and I want to be changed by your humanity. And we are interpersonally connected as animals. We feel each other before we speak. And the people you're talking to know that. They know, they can feel it, and they'll say to you, if you pause and find it in yourself, they will say to you, what are you doing? They can tell. So it's very important. It's like one of the central skills. There's many skills. There's like 12 strategies and 15 skills and 9 interrupters and 4 steps. It's a lot. The most important one to develop is how do you find the field of peace with every one of those so you don't become a manipulative jerk?
What would you say to listeners who are like, that sounds cool. I want that. And right now, life is hard and there's some pretty fucking manipulative jerks out there trying to rule the world. And my field of peace is being disrupted. Like, say somebody's listening right now and wants to find that field of peace. How do you suggest they go about doing that?
My favorite opener is to say to yourself, what I call my interrupter when I'm on my bullshit, is that I say to myself, I am entirely willing to see this differently. I'm seeking peace. And then I wait. But I have to become entirely willing because it doesn't have to do with them. They will do what they do. It is between you and your own soul. They might set things on fire. And how are you going to be?
Agreed. And because we are all some version of Aries right now, we know how to burn things down. We know how to match energy. Like, so not jumping in that space, that pacing that you were talking about, especially for someone like me, that logical sequential, like I'm on it. I could jump right in and set things ablaze. That pause becomes really important. And in the absence of that pause, I have seen things go up in flames. It's easy. It's really easy. So yeah, just how can you see this differently? Are you willing to see it differently? Because if there's no willingness, then the rest, it doesn't matter. You have to be willing.
There is a love beyond reason that's available to us if we're willing. And this is actually a very powerful skill because people who are engaged in the habits of dominance, they enjoy your pain. It's very sadistically, the more upset you are, the more tormented you are, the more gleeful they become if they're embracing the habits of dominance. So for those of you feeling very defiant, those of you having a little Aries FU in there, this is the antidote. If you grab your peace with both hands, you grab it, you prioritize it. It's actually what people who love dominance don't want. They don't want your peace. And inside your peace is your joy.
This example is a little bit adjacent, but it's what's coming up for me right now. My commitment to myself this year has been Catherine fucking dances in 2025.
Yes.
And my church, my place, the place that I love has become Thursday night bachata nights in East Hampton. It's one of the most diverse, beautiful, joyful spaces that I know and love. And last week I went and somehow the idea of nuclear war got in my brain. And I noticed myself while dancing, toggling between the joy and also just this fear and this grief that is just real right now. And I wanted to grab the field of peace and just like be in it and be in the field of joy and dancing in that moment. And I wasn't completely able to. I had to be present to the fear and the grief that was just somehow coming up. And then last night, like the dancing was incredible. And I was just like, oh, it was so good. It was like one of the best nights dancing last night. Earlier, Jack, you were talking about self-awareness and the willingness to see what my experience is in the moment. And like you're saying, to pause. So for example, last week might not have been a good week for me to have a hard conversation because I could have just been like, oh, I'm feeling raw right now, and I'm going to pause and have it when I'm ready. And last night might have been a great time for me to do that. And so just that, like, the pause, the pacing, the willingness, not insistence on feeling peace, but the like, I hear a lot of curiosity in what you're inviting people into. Like, where are we now and how might we do this differently?
Well, I think it's great to go dancing.
Yeah.
Thinking about us and each time we get together. When you started talking about dancing, the first thing that popped into my head was Suavemente. That's our theme music. And we dance like it it is a release. It's a connection. It's the indigenous pieces. Like before they're gonna do big work, have conversations, like we gonna dance. I think even in that space, there's still that element about the willingness to acknowledge that, yep, this thing is here. And also this thing is here. And to not deny one at the expense of the other. And the dancing anyway, in spite of, is I think where the power is, you know, and not getting tripped up in maybe I shouldn't be dancing at all, like because these things are going on, because then you've acquiesced to all of the horrible, rotten things, which I think is also part of what these folks want and delight in, you know, the despair and not doing the things that bring joy and even bring in connection that bring us together.
Yeah.
I have two thoughts from this part of the conversation. One is that I think dancing, singing, making art, making music, I think they're not about producing the thing, but that they're also portals to different ways of knowing and different kinds of wisdom that are trying to come to us. I do believe that this world is trying very hard to get us to let it love us. And often through music and dance is like, oh, sorry, I was in the way, and then we get out of the way. And the other thing is about this field of peace thing. It's a very specific idea for when you're working to create the conditions for making meaning. And that is like a big labor. It's not like the advice here is like, only live your life in the field of peace. Like that's another spirit. That's just that's somebody else's job. We're not your spiritual advisors. We're here to say, like, if you want to have dialogue that are fraught and you want to be actively creating the conditions for transformation, you're going to need a field of peace.
I'm curious, talking about friendships between Black women and white women. I imagine that there's people listening and been like, I would like a Black friend, like a white woman listening. Or like, I would just like a friend too, right? Like these times, it's hard to make friends, especially as adults. What comes up for you for people who might be asking that?
First, it's really funny. Like, I want a Black friend. Like, of course you do. Like, yeah. I think you have to know, like, if you, I want a Black friend, there's a lot that you're going to have to do to not only have a Black friend, but to keep a Black friend, and where that's going to bump up against your own wounds, your history. Because, like, in order to be my friend, like, I'm not a ray of sunshine. I am a bag of flaming hot Cheetos, and I got lots of things to be mad about. And a lot of it involves white people sometimes in the things that they do, like gesturing broadly, like, oh my God. And can we talk about that? Can we honestly talk about that? Right? Can you hold that rage? Can you make space for it? Can you not try to like pathologize it? Can you not even excuse away? But you gotta understand it. I don't want to hear all of that. Right? And can you honor my joy? Like, can we laugh and crack jokes? And those things are going to mean something. Like, can you have a deeper examination of like what whiteness does, how it has been strained, like the positionality, you know, that has been held. Like, I'm still trying to get through the book, They Were Her Property. And it is examining white women who owned enslaved people and benefited from that and played dumb. I didn't know what he was doing when the guy showed up at night and there's like 12 new bodies at my house. What you mean you ain't know? right? Those spaces and where that lands, of how are we showing up, and sitting in the tension of that, the pain of it, the like, oh, you hate this just as much as I do. And that's also something that builds my desire to stay in that connection with you. I sit on a commission. There are lots of white women at different stages of development. There's one that I've bumped heads with a lot. And we got into it in a space, and she clutched her pearls and did the thing. And it was like, we could have worked together so greatly and learned this and that. And I said, you know what? We still can. You have to stay, because that is a thing that white women don't do. Stay when it gets hard, and not just, well, I'm leaving because this is, stay. You want to impress me? Stay. And we had that conversation, and it went from, I don't know if I can. And then it turned into, I'm going to be here. She figured that out. And now, whether it was because of our conversation or not, I don't know. We haven't expressly had that conversation, but there's something about that staying power. Like, I am willing to be here, to be uncomfortable, to learn some things, and like, just go through this with you, as opposed to, I'm just going to head out, because that's what we get a lot. And as a Black woman, I don't have the luxury of like, I'm just going to head out. Like, we're in it, but you're so resilient, so strong. Guess what? It's because I always have to lift the weight. Like, there is no, I'm just not gonna, that's not how this has ever worked. Stay in this, be in this gym of life, and like go from lifting 5 pounds to 10, 15, 20, up to 100, whatever it is. But if you leave, that's it.
What's occurring to me right now is that as I relate to this in my own body here, that maybe there's stages of development, right? Like for white women, right? There's a stage of like the clutching of the pearls and the not taking responsibility and the not staying. And maybe there's a next level stage of development, which is like, it's all my responsibility, 100% my responsibility. And then maybe there's another stage of development, which I spend a lot of time in, and I go back and forth between these two parts of myself of, it's shared, like, right? It's a shared, we're talking about humans here. We all have responsibility, and it's different, but it's shared. I'm curious what thoughts might come up for either of you, or you, Jack, and like thinking of development as a friend, as a white woman friend.
I do think that we ask in our trainings, particularly this section on the relationship between Black women and white women, to ask about the white woman's development, where she is in relationship to her own whiteness. And I do resonate. Yes, there's the first stage where we are symbols to one another until we're not. In that first stage, I have to get past what we call page 25, because it's page 25 in our handbook.
I'm curious about like reading page 25, or if you could like reference like a couple of the key things.
So in our handbook, in our training, we get to this section where we talk about predictable responses that people will have, not just white women, but, and when I say them, you'll probably be like, oh, I've done that. Like, listener, I want to say these knowing that I've done them all, which is you see something that is received as showing that you're kind of clueless about some part of your identity, and the impact has been harmful in some way. And that your first response is, you know, if you really knew me, you'd know that I never could have meant that. First, I want you to forgive me, and I'm going to hound you till I get your forgiveness. And then I'm going to explain how, if you knew me, then you knew that's not what I meant. And then I'm going to explain that even more, how I've dedicated my life to justice and my resume for being oppressed personally. And then also how this is oppressing me right now. And then I might cry. And then this is why I can't even have conversations like this to show up at all. And you know what? Part of me was just triggered. And so anyway, I'm done. And that, I, C, D, E, F, G, all those I have done, listeners have probably done, and it's predictable. And when we've done this workshop with young women of color who are like, you have that in a handbook? I am not going out into the world. I'm not going to have any relationships with white people. And we're like, well, no, it's in the handbook because it's actually manageable, but it's not supposed to be managed by the people of color. You're supposed to lovingly manage it, your own white people. We're not supposed to look at other white people who just did the thing that we did last week or last year and be like, now I'm superior and I'm going to lecture you and make you feel humiliated. That's from our favorite meme that captures this. You all be like, but y'all be like the y'all, meaning that we replicate dominance when we're trying to interrupt it, and that will never work. You can't shame people into stopping shaming other people. You can't bully people into stopping bullying others. You can't be superior towards people into stopping them being superior. So we have to know those things happen and then be skillful enough to lovingly work with that with our other folks and to receive it. That's a whole stage. That is a whole, some people, you're probably thinking about a lot of people are like, nope, they're not there. Right. But then after you're done that work, it is foolish to be like, yes, everything a person of color says is
Right.
because the deal is to have really loving, healing relationships means we actually need everybody's gifts.
Yeah.
And it means that you have gifts, he has gifts, and I have gifts, and we don't have each other's gifts. And that the circle needs me too. In all the original Indigenous grandmother global circles, the white grandmother's missing. She's not coming correct yet. It's like, we need your gifts. We just don't want you to be the last word or the top of the pyramid. We just need you in the circle. So I think what makes it easier to be a white person if you're like, I want a black friend, is if you're authentic and you're not all about being the first word and the last word, right? Be yourself. I personally like mayonnaise. They give me no end of shit about that. I actually like it. I like it with, but I don't need my hot sauce in it. I actually am so stereotypically white. I like my mayonnaise. In fact, I think if we're all growing up, by the time we're about 28, we get sick of ourselves, right? We like our own story. Come on. And we begin as we heal and grow, we begin to fall in love with the rest of humanity. But the habits of white culture, the dominant culture of colonization, is actually not to have you fall in love with humanity, but to have you just keep falling in love with your own reflection. We all have work, but we have different work.
What is each of your work right now and how you show up in relationship, especially in relationships with Tanisha, white women, or JAC, black women, or anything that comes up about your own learning edges right now?
For me, I'm observing because there's also the thing that happens too, like being in a good friendship with a white woman. It's like, oh, y'all are capable of doing this stuff. I try not to get too much into my own headspace of like white folks and how a lot of them show up. It's being reminded, like, not all the white people, even though when that shows up from a white person, well, not all white people. It's, well, what are you doing to not be classified as the not all white people? Because in that space, then you should be gathering up the white people that are like, go get your people. Like, we can't show up this way and expect that the world is going to be better. And then my internal workings and keeping myself grounded and heart open to maintain the willingness, because that's something that it's increasingly hard, like with all that is happening, to not turn into the very people like that y'all be like I know how to replicate dominance, and knowing like I can't show up that way with someone and expecting that there be some kind of transformation. Checking my rage, like not being a bag of flaming hot Cheetos like everywhere that I go, just because that's that same thing about domination. Like, well, you know, you done made me feel like this, so I'm gonna just throw Cheeto puff dust everywhere. That's not okay. Part of my work is doing my dance, whatever that happens to be. Can't do bachata. I try as I may, but just the things that are my version of the dancing, to get those things out, to cultivate joy as resistance to rest, to pace myself and all of these things, because it's easy to just burn myself and everybody else. So I feel like the essential parts of this ongoing work for me, to be able to stay in relationship.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm. Thank you.
Yeah.
For me, this was good. Really made me think. I have now ended up with not many relationships with white people.
Uh-huh.
And so my work is really, my deep work is with other white women who are shaped by white men without knowing it. I'm nearing 60, and it's really hard to watch the arc of my contemporaries who have either come to terms with their relationship with white men and how it shapes who we are, or have not. And so what I want to do is get really judgy and embody all the ick about those wounds in my contemporary white ladies. And if you don't do your work in relationship to white men and how we've been shaped by them, then you're not reliable enough to be in a relationship across racial difference.
Yeah.
So my work is finding beyond peace, actually finding actual love and remembering each step of that way of like my true compassionate, accountable self. And that's good work for me. It's helping me not become a jerk. And then the other part, just me personally, is that I am outgrowing finally, um, is that I've been a big baby, just like I want everyone to celebrate me and love me, and that I'm outgrowing that. Also, not being someone who's just like, I don't care what you think. Like, no, like other people matter. Like, but who's not just needing approval. It's embarrassing to say that, but that's been like lifelong work to stop being a big baby. And then the last thing that we all do at the bad kids table, and we can't advise anyone else to do this. This is just like our choice. We take all the emotional risks. We just give more, trust more, say more. We're more loving. We're like, because we just feel like if we have this love together, we ought to give more because people need it. And you can't, that's not advice. We're just saying that we're going to trust first. We're not going to wait for the conditions. We're not going to wait for you to prove that you're trustworthy. We're just going to be like, okay, you're here. We're here. We want you at the cookout. Come on. Even though it's not my invitation to give. Like, I got a day pass and I'll come when I'm invited. But, like, we're just generous. And that seems to be helping.
I'm so glad that you all have the bad kids table and each other. It sounds delicious. And yeah. Is there anything else that you would want to share with listeners about friendship, conflict, relationships between Black women and white women as we close?
I would just say conflict is going to happen. It's the trust, it's the staying power, it's building that space, one interaction at a time, and being your authentic self. Like, I think that's something that has been evident here. Like, we actually talk about the real, not just the surface, like, oh, how's the weather? No, we talk about all the things, how sometimes these kids get on my nerves, how this thing is really hard, or it's just the reality of what is, and opening your heart and sharing your authentic self.
We're totally inappropriate.
Appropriately so.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this conversation has been so delicious. There's so much more, all the 9 and the 4, the 13, and all of the different things. So how do people learn more about all of those different things from you all?
We got a website. If you go to growinganewheart.org, there is a public-facing calendar because we've been offering these for years. People sponsor them, but now we have a lot of people across the country just saying as individuals, I'd like to learn these things. So you can go and check them out. And sometimes We have podcasts and then social media. We're in good relationship with the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color, and we'll be developing podcasts with them. So you can follow us on our socials. It's growing a new heart.
Great. Well, I will include that in the show notes. And thank you both so much. I'm going to check out that calendar.
Great. This is
Yeah.
really fun.
Thank you so much for joining me. If you loved this conversation and want to hear more, I invite you to do 3 things. First, go to the Conflict Decoded show page wherever you listen to podcasts and tap the plus sign or click on follow. That way, you'll be the first to hear my new episodes and I will get to share them with you. Second, while you're there, if you would be willing to give the podcast a 5-star review or share it with a friend, I would be very grateful. And finally, if you are eager to receive the latest episodes by email, along with other morsels of guidance to support you and your work in the world, I invite you to subscribe to my Saturday Love Letters to Changemakers. To do this, visit callingsandcourage.com/subscribe. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take good care.